Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast today. We have Ian Hoppe, CEO and founder of Conduit, a platform for electrical design, analysis, and collaboration. Ian, thank you so much for joining the show. I'm really excited to dive into your background, your experience, what you're working on at Conduit. We were chatting a little bit, before the episode about, the interesting, I think, nuances of the EV space, electrical vehicle space, and how, certain companies, for me, I'm very curious about not only how everything's being built now that in an emerging space, but also the different collaboration companies and even local governments, I'm sure, are having with the technology that is being implemented infrastructurally. But before we get into all of that, what were you doing before you started Conduit?
Right before I started Conduit, I was a journalist for 5 or 6 years. I was in journalism. I ran actually the video department for a big regional news organization here in the Southeast, which is
Oh,
where
wow.
we're based. So I covered a lot of news, between 2014 and 2018 or so. And I started this in 2020, right as the pandemic was covering up the world.
Wow. So and within that, I mean, being part of the journalism, what moved you into entrepreneurship? And you did all this coverage. I'm sure you had an interesting insight into a lot of different companies, businesses, even government and things like that. What led you into Conduit?
Yeah. So for the first 2 years, when I was working as a journalist, I was covering the tech community here in Birmingham, Alabama, which is where we're based. It's a kind of growing, thriving, technology community here. And I covered, there's a big group just right down the road here. There's a big place called Innovation Depot. That's like a big incubator for startups. And so I used to just like crawl those halls and talk to folks, cover these startups. So I met a lot of folks in there, and it was a pretty cool experience. And previously, before I was working in journalism, I worked as an electrician and an electrical engineer. And that's where I kind of came up with the idea. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. So what was I guess, were you using journalism as a conduit, I guess, for learning more about the community, or were you just covering it kind of as an overall interest in the different ways it was growing and expanding? I think a lot of times we think about tech in Silicon Valley or Silicon Beach, if you're thinking about Los Angeles or in Miami or all these other locations, but really it's now so widespread that it seems like tech is everywhere, software is everywhere. Any industry can really be affected by technology, right? Yeah, just curious about, we're using that as kind of like a way to learn about the community to build your own company.
I was really, more than anything, I was kind of getting away from the electrical world. So like my family is all like electrical. So my dad's an engineer, my whole family are all electricians, engineers. And that's what I was doing for most of my 20s up until that point. And yeah, I kind of wanted to black sheep it a little bit and go do something completely different. I made a lot of friends and learned a lot, and certainly was able to, was kind of part of the exposure of these kind of, what they call sort of third tier markets, tech markets, right? So like, you have the original New York, Boston, Silicon Valley, right? It's like what they call like tier. And you had like Atlanta, Salt Lake City, Austin, like tier 2. And next is like what they're calling like tier 3, right? That's like, Birmingham is on that list. Philadelphia is on that list. St. Louis is on that list. And so there's like these like kind of smaller, medium-sized cities like this one, that have like these tech scenes that are growing up. And for investors, they're looking at these up and coming scenes because valuations are a little lower. It's like kind of overlooked companies. But yeah, like you said, there's a lot going on here. And Birmingham in particular has some of the largest construction companies in the world. We have like huge international construction companies, which most people don't realize. Most people don't even think of, right? But, Braston, Gorey, for construction, big contractors based here. And so there's a lot of opportunity around the construction and construction technology spaces.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. Is the different tiers just, to conceptualize that, that's just like the density of companies that are building within technology and software.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's like kind of when they happened, right? So like the way that I tend to think of it as like a cascading effect. So, right. So like Siri, like the A tier, like Silicon Valley, right? That was like the original, like Intel, Apple, HP, like these big companies, right? That created it. And they all spun out these people with lots of money who invested in local new startups, right? And then those startups grew up and they invested. And then they said, oh gosh, everybody here is very rich and the valuations are super high. Let's go look in Atlanta. Right. And so they went to where they were in Austin, and like, okay, we're going to go look in Austin. And now there's all these small companies trying to get going, and it's injected with this A-tier money. Right.
Yeah.
And so now, I mean, my main investors are in New York and Austin. I'm sorry, New York and Atlanta. And so like, and they're pumping money into Birmingham, because we've got all these new tech companies, and they're still investing in, you know, A and B tiers. But these like C tier, I feel like, is up and coming and has got a lot of money coming into it. So it's growing pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, what do you think the expansion of these different cities, that founders having just more access to other bits of technology I mean, obviously technology, especially with the invention of like no code platforms, you know, it is really making it easier to bring up a website, build a product, you know, build up an MVP and start pitching that out there. Yeah, I'm just curious. Is it the access to technology that's kind of moving this forward? Is it the conversations that founders are have? Are they moving in dispersed groups? Yeah. What do you think is kind of or some of the key features from the growth that you've seen in these different areas?
So one thing that's really successful and that I had a lot of success through is accelerators.
Yeah.
So I went through Techstars. Because Techstars actually opened up an office here in 2020. I happened to be an energy tech accelerator, which was just serendipity for me, right? It was like in my backyard. And Techstars they know how to train and grow a company, right? That's what they do. And like, they're technically, they're an accelerator, but they're an investment firm, you know? So they put money into these companies and they take a chunk of their equity, right? And then they train them over a really intense 14 weeks and then graduate them into fundraising. And so I went through the first year of the Techstars here, and it was like life-changing. And it built me an immediate network of people all over the country that are doing this same thing or have done it successfully or not, you know? So like, other founders, you know? And so now this is 2022, and I think demo day is in like a couple of weeks for the new cohort. And then it will be 30 companies that they've accelerated through the energy tech space here in Birmingham, you know?
Yeah.
So that's like, it's such a multiplying effect. And, you know, not only, you know, the companies are from all over, there's 2 companies this year in the cohort this year from Sweden that moved here to Birmingham, right? And some of them stay and some of them don't. But like in my class, 3 companies stayed. And in the class after that, I think 4 or 5 stayed, you know, and opened up offices here. So that like, and then they've got this network of Techstars companies, this network of other founders. And like my class is helping that class, and that class is helping this year's class, right? It all kind of like, we used to talk about like, you know, building a startup is like jumping off a cliff and building a plane before you hit the ground, right?
Yeah.
And the cool thing about going through an accelerator, like Techstars or like Y Combinator or all the other accelerators out there, is that like, okay, you're falling with your co-founder and you're trying to put this plane together, and you look out and you look like left and right, and there are like Techstars folks like helping you like put the plane together, you know? And that's kind of the value of it.
Right.
And it's pretty powerful.
Yeah. Well, let's see, moving into Conduit, what was the inspiration for building something in energy technology and especially specifically within the space that you're doing it? And tell us a little bit more about the product and what's got you excited about it.
Yeah. So years ago, where this all kind of started, I used to be an electrician and an engineer. And when I was working for an engineering firm here in Birmingham, so Birmingham has, UAB is the University of Alabama at Birmingham is a top 10 like medical school. And it's right in the middle of downtown Birmingham. And so there's a lot of hospitals, it's a teaching hospital. There's a bunch of hospitals here, a lot of healthcare, probably more per capita than we need. And so, the engineering firm that I worked for worked on a lot of these hospitals. So basically maintaining it. And my job, because I understand how electrical equipment goes together, because I spent a lot of time in the field, they would have me out collecting information about real world systems. Like, how is this put together? Building what are called as-builts, of electrical systems. So like, what's actually out there and how is it connected? What are all the parts and pieces, right? And they would send me out to these hospitals. And the reason you're building these as-builts is that if you're gonna add anything onto a facility, you got to know what's already there. You know, you have to have an understanding what's going on. And so I would usually show up to these facilities and say, "Hey, Mr. Maintenance Director, where are your as-builts? Where are your electrical records?" And he would go, "We don't have any electrical records. We've got a bunch of old drawings underneath Bob's desk, and the rest of it lives in Bob's head, right?" And so I would start at the power. This is a hospital. If you go look around your city and you find the hospitals, most of them do not know how their electrical systems are put together. Not in any granular detail. It's pretty incredible because it's a complex process. And so I would usually start at where the power company hit the side of the building and trace this cascade of electrical system equipment all the way through the building. It took me months, and we're talking about like St. Vincent's Hospital here on the south side of Birmingham has 735 pieces of equipment in it, and I would be inside every single one of them. It took me 2 or 3 months, right? Wow. Collect all this information, take pictures, and literally draw a diagram of the system by hand on a big piece of paper. So I thought about that for years, all the way through my journalism times, and learned kind of like about what it would look like to start a company while covering these startups here in Birmingham. So 2019, I started working kind of nights and weekends building a tablet application to walk somebody through the collection of all this information about an existing electrical system. And then it validates what you're putting in, making sure it's correct and complete. And then it saves it in the cloud along with photos and notes as a kind of like a living record of this electrical system.
Yeah.
And that was great. So I went through TechStars, I applied to TechStars, got in, went through that, changed my life, raised a pre-seed round at the beginning of 2021. And then me and my boy out here, I'm looking in my office, and this is my VP of growth. He was a contractor with me at the time. And he and I went on like a customer discovery odyssey. Like we were just like huge. I think we booked over 100 meetings, and we just went to all these different groups and we're like, I know we got something valuable. Like who's buying it? Who's buying it and what are they buying? How are we selling it to them? And we want to talk to facility owners, facility management companies, electrical contractors, electrical engineers. We did a big old rabbit hole with insurance companies who were really interested, but they're like move really slow. So we put them on the back burner, and we decided into 2021, as our product was first getting onto the App Store, that we're selling this to electrical contractors, electricians and the companies they work for, right? And we're going to sell them a tool to catalog the facilities that they serve, right? So they all serve all these, every single, electrical contracting firm has 60 or 80 or 200 facilities that they have relationships with, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to give them a tool to catalog those facilities because, like I said before, most people don't have records of their electrical systems and they need them, right? And we're going to give them a tool to do that. So that was going well, but it was earlier this year. It was probably March of this year when one of our customers came to us and said, hey, can you help us with these EV charger installations? And we started looking at it, and it turns out that behind the installation of every single one of these new EV chargers going into a parking lot all over the country is an electrician or an engineer standing there with an out-of-date single line diagram of this facility, trying to figure out how to fit this brand new piece of equipment into a 1970s electrical system nobody kept records of, right? I was like, oh, that's what we do. We catalog electrical systems, right? So then it was like, okay, I had this kind of moment. We really started focusing specifically, not just on electrical contractors, but on a subsection of those, which are EV charger installers. And changed around some of our feature set, updated kind of our pricing a little bit, that's the whole conversation there. And we updated all that and released version 3.0 in June. Specifically towards all this stuff. And in July, we 6x'd the number of people on the platform. That's kind of blew up from there.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, it's incredible. Just going back on the technology piece, when you say it validates whatever drawing or designs or whatever data you're inputting, is it like a kind of a free, how do I say this? Are there certain specific ways that things are done correctly and it kind of compares what you inputted in kind of the I guess encyclopedia or I guess database of how things are supposed to be done and just make sure that it is in line with yeah.
So the way what it's bounced off of is National Electric Code.
Got it.
So so it's checking and making sure that because you just write something by hand, you don't know what's wrong until 2 months later you're back to your office. You know what I mean? And so there's a finite list of wire sizes you can put in there. Right?
Yeah.
And if the wire size is too big or too small, it's going to go like, are you sure? And you can say yes. You can say, yes, I'm sure. And maybe that is what it is, but it's just checking to make sure that what you're putting in is correct. And even more importantly than that, complete, because if you get 80% of what you need out there, and then you go back to the office, you can't complete the job, You've got to make sure while you're in that electrical room, you get all the information you need,
Yeah. Yeah. It is so fascinating within the, EV space and the fact that you were able to 10x in 6 months, in such a short amount of time. Are just more and more companies building these stations and are there more, incentives around building these as well, whether it's from a local government standpoint or from a monetary kind of private company standpoint?
Oh man, it's blowing up, especially in your neck of the woods. I mean, all of our new customers are out on the West Coast.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, well, I say that, but we just brought on a big group in Atlanta too. So Atlanta's got a big, so it is at such a rate. There's a gold rush going on. It's like a land grab gold rush, all over the world. We're talking to ChargePoint Europe about the same problem they got over there,
Yeah.
They're, and every single facility in the country is asking themselves, can I put EV chargers in my parking lot? They are all having that conversation with their utility guys, with their maintenance folks, trying to figure this problem out. And yeah, the demand is just out of control. They can't put them in fast enough. Supply chain issues are a major problem. And another major problem that we're running into is utility capacity, or, not just their capacity on the grid, but their capacity to get the work done, cause like, for instance, I found in Salt Lake City, like a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, one of our customers, went to an Ace Hardware out just outside of Salt Lake City, came to him and said, hey, I want 4 EV chargers in my parking lot, like big DC fast chargers. And Rod, my guy with Logistics, was like, yeah, sure, I'm coming. Like, we'll get it going. And like, so he goes out there, they put together like a proposal to put these 4 EV chargers in the parking lot. And they go to the utility and say, hey, we need 277, 480 voltage, and we need a lot of it. And we're prepared to pay for it to upgrade the service, coming in here. And the utility company said, yeah, talk to us in 24 months. Like, we don't even have time to mess with that. And so like Rod and them, they got together, and instead of saying, okay, well, never mind, they built a microgrid. They built a solar array on the roof. They're putting a hydrogen fuel cell in the back of the place. And they're basically never going to pay a power bill again. Right. And the ROI on that, this is probably a $1.2, $1.3 million job. The ROI is in less than 3 years because of all the state and federal incentives. Wow. It's insane. It's like, yeah, it's a gold rush.
Yeah. I mean, it's so fascinating how, first of all, the creativity to just be like, nope, we're going to source this power ourselves, and we're going to do so because there's such an incentive, not only, within, I'm sure government wise, but also within what it can actually, give in terms of the customers and the users that they're going to have. And they're going to be, kind of going with this anecdotal story here. They're going to be a shift in the power grid system. You said a lot of these are old, built in the 1970s, or maybe even older than that. And the utility, I'm sure, and utility is capacity of the amount of voltage it can kind of utilize from the power system. Is that what it is, or what is utility?
Yeah, so the utility companies, so like around here it's Alamo Power, out there it's PG&E, right?
Got it.
And they can only make so much power.
Got it.
And then you're also limited. For instance, like, are you at your house right now?
Yeah, I am.
So like your house probably has like maybe a 200 amp service coming in, right? And it's like a little wire, right? And that's what it was made for, because, it was put together in the 1980s or whatever, right? And they usually had an oven and a bunch of lights, and some places to plug in your appliances,
Yeah.
And now you say, okay, I want to put in a DC fast charger, and that's going to take 100 of those amps. You've only got 200, and you're using 150 of them. And suddenly you got to put this big new load in here.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a massive, and you got to make that. So somebody's going to come up and make that wire bigger.
Yeah.
And if that wire is bigger and all the wires on your street are bigger, then the wire coming to your street has to get bigger.
Yeah.
And then the wire feeding that wire has to, you know what I'm saying? So it becomes this like multiplying problem. And it's all this stuff that was put in at, back in the day when they were like, oh, this is plenty. We got plenty, and without realizing, every single gas truck you see on the highway, that represents a certain amount of energy.
Right.
All that energy has got to move onto the power lines.
Yeah.
Every single bit of it. That's like the transition we're in right now. It's pretty significant.
Is the innovation going to come from private companies building solar or other ways to generate energy kind of more localized towards, say, my community or my neighborhood versus, being so reliant on major power providers? Because I just feel like that level of increased service just across the board, it would be a huge undertaking, and it would take so much time. Do you see a lot of companies innovating in the space, and is that an exciting, kind of a ecosystem for you to get into now that you have a product that helps them not only keep track of design, but also the implementation and collaboration within their team?
Yeah. I think it's going to be all these companies are trying to solve this problem because it's coming from demand. So people are buying EV chargers or EV cars. They need a place or a way to power them. And so it's not like we could be like, maybe we won't invest in it. Like you have to. Like somebody has to solve this problem, you know?
Yeah.
And so like, yeah, the innovations are happening really quick. I think I have a lot of hope for the hydrogen fuel cell world. I think I went through a plant when I was out there in Utah. And it was really impressive. Like the technology they're making, and it's still very expensive. You know, making hydrogen for that is still very expensive. But in the IRA, that new act that just passed like a month or so ago, 2 months ago. There's a bunch of money investment for bringing that price of hydrogen down. And I think that's going to be some pretty incredible technology, and it's going to help drive this distributed power generation model where you have microgrids everywhere kind of interacting.
Yeah. What's the most difficult piece around building in such a space that's, I'm sure, changing, you know, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly? What's the most challenging part of saying I get ahead of the curve, or the just making and fine tuning your product to fit specific needs better? Where is the challenge in your case?
Yeah. I mean, the fact it's just so Wild West.
Yeah.
Like all these different companies all are operating, because right now in the EV space in particular, all these companies are like constantly acquiring each other and changing their business model. Everybody's trying to figure it out, you know? And so like when we go talk to, so our customers are the people that actually are on the ground doing the installation of these EV chargers, right? You go talk to an OEM, a manufacturer of EV chargers, like a ChargePoint, like a, you know, EV Go, right? Those are two good examples, because ChargePoint, they don't have installers in-house. They subcontract installers. That's our customer, right? But EV Go has installers in-house. So those are two completely different business models. Like one is a channel partner and one is a customer, but they're the same kind of company. And that's just because they're both trying different things out. You know what I mean? And so that's their incentives. Everybody's incentives are a little different. So selling into that, it's just kind of a mess. Nothing's standardized yet. And we're trying to help with that. We're trying to like work towards that. But the product is constantly having to kind of shift and change and adjust to meet those needs, you know?
Yeah. How do you sell into those different partners? What strategies do you use based on if you're selling to someone who has the team in-house versus someone outside that?
So we've got a few things. So one of the things that we've started doing inside of Conduit is like an actual design piece to where you can design a new installation. So you collect what's there, you have an understanding of what's there, and then based upon that, you can design a new EV charger coming off of it, right? And all the infrastructure that requires.
Right.
Right now, everything inside of Conduit is all generic. So you say, this is an EV charger and it has a 40 amp rating, right? Well, what ChargePoint, a lot of these folks are interested in, the manufacturers in particular, are, it's not a generic EV charger anymore. It's now a ChargePoint CT4021, right? That has a certain size wire and breaker that needs upstream. Right? So we check all of that and make sure it's good. And what that does is put ChargePoint and the ability to design with ChargePoint in the hands of people in the world.
Yeah.
Which is a massive sales opportunity for them. Right.
Yeah.
And so like what we're trying to work on right now, we're going on a project with them right now is, hey, ChargePoint, we'll let you get on our platform as a piece of equipment you can design with if you pay us and also recommend us to your installers. Right. So we're trying to work through that. Like basically the data and the users are the product in a weird way. So yeah, and it's all, like I said, it's all kind of in flux right now. Constantly figuring out, you know, who your customer is and why they're your customer and what their incentives are. It's all very interesting and ever changing.
Yeah. And I mean, it seems like it seems like a challenge overall because, you know, not only can ChargePoint be your customer, but whoever wants say, hey, ChargePoint, I need your chargers in my parking lot. And then those installers may not even come from them. They could come from another subcontracted customer, and then they could still use your product. So it's fascinating to learn about this space, particularly because it seems like there's a bunch of different use cases for the product, but the moving target is the actual customer and how to kind of define that and target that individual. I guess kind of more on a broad scale, what are some of the biggest challenges that Conduit faces today?
Ooh, so I'm raising capital right now. I'm raising a seed
Yeah.
round. And that's been really difficult. I mean, the market right now for investment is not great. I'm kind of up against the wall, so I've got to raise, um,
Yeah.
which is not where I wanted to be, but it is what it is. So I got to go get money. And so finding investors right now has been difficult. I've got a lead investor that I'm going to sign a term sheet with like tomorrow. So it's like coming together.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, just, as over the last, I've been raising now for about 2 months. And during that time, like the conversations have gotten harder, and I could feel the ground shifting underneath me. So
Yeah.
got to get this round closed before, because there was a lot of really great term sheets out there that were signed and things were coming together in, fall of 2008, and they
Right.
all went away,
Yeah.
And so like, I'm trying not to say that we're there, but like, you never know, like stuff changes really quick and then there's no more to it, no matter how well we're doing or what our customer base looks like.
Yeah.
So we're that's been a real challenge. And then, while I'm raising means I'm not working full time on the company,
Right. Right.
So like I've got just three of us, we're a small growing company. And like these two guys have a lot more work, to do. I'm out. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's been a challenge. I'm ready to get this round closed and move on to actually working on the company.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you kind of work through the delegation of responsibility? I guess advice for other founders who are maybe in similar positions as yourself. What advice would you give them in terms of delegating responsibilities, managing the process of, fundraising, while also kind of having this internal drive to work on the company?
Yeah. I mean, hiring the right people. That's what it comes down to. I mean, I laid off a couple of folks back in midway through the summer because I don't know, they weren't startup folks. Like there's a really important feature that is the type of people that want to work in startups. And that is like, oh, there's something laying on the ground. I need to pick it up. It doesn't matter if it's sales or software development or whatever. Like all this has to get done, And so like, we all just have to work together to make it happen. And like, some people are better at other things and they have different connections and whatever, but like, it's all got to get done. And like finding the right folks is everything, the type of person who'll do that is really important.
Yeah. If everything does go well, what's the long-term vision for Conduit?
I think that, we grow, I think we start in the EV space. I think as I mentioned, when I was talking about the kind of growing of the company and the idea, we're much bigger than EV charger installation. We're electrical contracting at large. So I think that we do another 12 to 18 months of specific EV charging, and really figure it out. Cause like that market is like super high volume and high velocity. There's like lots of small jobs, right? Yeah, they got to get done. So it's perfect for Conduit because we can like figure stuff out. Then in the long run, I think that we expand to all electrical contractors and engineers, and really move into the market as almost like an AutoCAD competitor, for the electrical industry. I think that that's where we're headed.
Incredible. I always like to ask this, what makes your job particularly hard?
It's lonely as hell, man. Like, I think, I don't know, part of the reason why it's nice to have other founders around because they realize what you're doing. But yeah, it's just, you just got a lot in your head and everything. The notion of the job is getting all that out of your head and other people understanding it and doing stuff with it. But like early on, every single bit of marketing, every piece of like messaging and like what you're doing and what the product needs to be, it's all got to get out of your brain and into somebody else's. And like getting that right. Cause that's the hardest part is if like, you can say it all day long, but like getting them to understand it and making it happen is so hard. And I feel like I'm over that hump a little bit now, just because I've got like two guys that like know what we're doing and have the same vision, but it's like getting everybody aligned on that vision and keeping everybody aligned. I mean, if I go on vacation for a week, I come back, everybody's like floating in space, just because like I'm the only thing that like keeps it on the rails because I've got the rail,
Yeah.
And so like, that's really frustrating and it's really lonely, like being like, everything is dependent on you. It's all going to flow down from you. Not that it flows down. Like I run a very flat hierarchy here, but it's all going to come out of you. And it's difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. I would like to ask this question as well. One for selfish research purposes, but also for my audience. whether it was early in your career or now, what books or people have influenced you the most?
Books and people. Man, great question. So I am a huge fan. Fan is not the right word. I'm not a fan of these two people. I am very interested in Winston Churchill. I think he's like a fascinating guy. There's a really great book by Andrew. What? I'm blanking on his name right now. Very famous historian who wrote a big biography, massive biography on Winston Churchill. And like I said, I'm not a particular like fan of Winston Churchill, but I think he was a fascinating guy who created and was just prolific. You know, and I think him and Napoleon and some of these like big like European greats were just like workaholics and single-minded and created an immense amount of we would use the word content now, but like they had like massive vision and they created it around them. And I think that's just fascinating. They're those two characters in particular are very inspiring to me. Not necessarily in like every single thing they did, but in the way they did it.
Yeah. That's such a great way to put it. And some people, if they think about like Apple, they think about Steve Jobs, or they think about Bill Gates, people who had really a single-minded vision and executed on it so well, so that they it was just like they were relentless and regardless of the feedback that they were getting. So I mean those are interesting figures to have research on. And I always like to add this a little bit at the end, because I know we're coming close to the end of the episode. Tell us where we can support. Tell us where we can be a part of it. If I'm a customer, where can I find you? Give us your plugs. What are your LinkedIn's, your websites, all the information we need to be a part of the vision of Conduit.
Yeah. So we're on Conduit. That's CONDOIT.io. That's our website. We're on LinkedIn. My name is Ian, IAN Hoppe, Hoppe. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter. I was verified before you could buy it.
Before it was cool.
On Twitter. So that's, you can find us there. Just get in touch with us. I think anybody in and around the EV charger installation space, companies in particular, I want to talk to you. I think that there's, we have a kind of common theme around here, like saying that like, even if we got off a call and we didn't make a sale, like one more person knows about Conduit in the world.
Yeah.
That's an important thing.
Love that mentality.
I would say this Andrew Roberts wrote the book on Churchill, and it's called Walking with Destiny.
Walking with Destiny. I love that. I love that. Well, Ian, I hope you enjoyed yourself. It was so interesting learning about not only your expertise and also your history behind building companies, how you learned about other startups and then the different strategies you're deploying now in the midst of building is always so exciting, because I think a lot of other founders are either in the same boat or can take from everyone's experience or people's advice. So I hope you enjoyed yourself, and thank you again for being on the show.
Thanks, Julian. Huge fan of what you're doing, man.
Appreciate it.